Being mindful in daily life. Get up early and go to bed at a reasonable time. Knowing how time flies, we should treasure every day. When we get up, we should wash our face and brush our teeth. After using the toilet, we should always wash our hands. Our hat should be properly put on, clothing correctly buttoned, and socks and shoes neatly worn. We should put our clothes away in their proper places. We should not leave them lying around, for they will get dirty that way. We need to look after ourselves and keep our rooms tidy. After all, not everyone has an Aunt Alexa. Georgina did not like to clean her room. When her mother told her to put her things away, Georgina would always mumble later and continue with what she was doing. One day, after Georgina said later, she noticed her mother looking very thoughtful. Georgina became curious, not knowing what her mother was thinking. At last, her mother said, "We'll see what Aunt Alexa thinks of this." She then quietly closed the door. Curiosity turned to confusion. Georgina didn't have an Aunt Alexa. What was her mother talking about? That night, it took Georgina a long time to fall asleep. When she finally did, she had the strangest dream. A woman was busily moving around the room and throwing all Georgina's clothes that were on the floor onto her bed. Georgina was being buried alive. In a panic, she woke up. And then she really panicked, for it wasn't a dream. There was a woman in Georgina's room, and she was busily throwing clothes on top of the bed as if Georgina wasn't there. For a few moments, Georgina couldn't talk, but finally she managed to get out a "Who are you?" The woman looked at Georgina and replied in a very matter-of-fact voice, "Aunt Alexa, of course." Georgina blinked. The woman seemed harmless. That is, as long as you didn't count trying to bury Georgina alive under her own clothes. "I don't have an Aunt Alexa," she informed the woman. Without batting an eyelid, the woman replied, "Of course you do. I'm her." And with that, she dumped another pile of clothes on the bed. Georgina was getting really frustrated with the whole situation. "I do not have an Aunt Alexa," she snapped. "Well, if you do not have an Aunt Alexa, then why did your mother say she was going to see what I thought about this?" Georgina couldn't think of a thing to say to that, so the woman dumped another pile of clothes on the bed. With the clothes now spilling onto the floor, Georgina was beginning to fear she wouldn't be able to get out of her own bed. "Stop," she demanded, but the woman ignored her and reached for the next pile of clothes. "Please stop," she asked, remembering the wonderful effect this word had on adults. Immediately, the woman stopped and stood there. "Ah, are you talking to me, dear?" Georgina blurted out in frustration at a situation over which she didn't seem to have any of her usual control. Of course I am. Who else would I be talking to? The woman frowned and reached for the clothes again. I'm sorry, said Georgina, who now was almost buried under the mountain of clothing. I'm not used to seeing people, sorry, ants, picking up my clothes in the middle of the night. Well, of course you're not. Your poor mother has never asked me for help before. Georgina decided she had better get out of her bed while she still could and tumbled onto the floor. She asked, speaking politely this time, "Why are you here?" "I am here because your room is a mess. You dump everything on the floor, and your mother has to always pick up after you. If she didn't, you'd never be able to find anything. Shocking, just shocking," Aunt Alexa continued, looking around and gesturing at the clothing. Georgina looked around and found she had to agree. It was a mess, and looking at it now through her aunt's eyes, it did seem shocking and embarrassing, and even worse, hopeless. She looked up at her aunt and said anxiously, "If Mom sees this, she'll pass out. What can I do? I'll never be able to clean all this up by morning." Aunt Alexa smiled at Georgina for the first time. "Would you like me to help you clean up?" Georgina nodded and said gratefully, "Oh, yes, please." Together they began to clean up all the clothes. It wasn't easy because there was clothing on the bed, on the floor, the chair, dresser, everywhere. As Georgina began to put everything away, she thought what a pain it was to have to do this. And her mother did it every week. Eventually, they got every last bit of clothing put away. Georgina was exhausted as she got back into her bed. She smiled up at Aunt Alexa. Then Georgina impulsively threw her arms around her aunt's neck and breathed a sleepy "thank you" into her ear. She then kissed her aunt on the cheek and said good night. The next day, Georgina's mother knocked and then opened the door and looked around at the now spotless room in amazement. She looked at Georgina questioningly. Smiling, Georgina explained, "Aunt Alexa was here last night and helped me clean everything up." Her mother laughed. "Ah, yes, that was something my mother occasionally said to me. But there's never been an Aunt Alexa in our family. Keeping our things neat is much easier than cleaning up a mess." It is more important that our clothes be neat and clean than fashionable and expensive. We should wear what is suitable and appropriate for our age and within our family's means. When eating and drinking, do not be fussy. Eat only the right amount. Do not overeat. When we are young, we should not drink alcohol. The behavior of those who are drunk is unsightly. Kids may think that having the latest, most expensive clothes with designer labels and in styles older kids wear is crucial if they want to fit in. But having the latest styles is not necessary or practical. Even if we spend money beyond our family's means on clothing, we still won't be able to keep up in other ways. And if we try to, we'll end up causing problems for our parents. So it is better to dress simply and to only buy what our family can afford. That way, we know the friends we have like us for who we are, not because we wear expensive clothes. We also need to behave politely when eating. When given something to eat or drink, we should appreciate it and not complain or say we want something else. Also, we should not eat too much. This is tough to do, especially when it is something we really like. But overeating will not only make us sick, but fat as well. Although kids at school may say it is the thing to do, alcohol and drugs can make kids and adults do dumb things that they would never do otherwise. So if they are offered to you, leave and go tell an adult what happened. Whether alcohol or drugs, they simply do not go with kids. Walk in an unhurried manner and always stand up straight. Whether greeting friends or elders, do so properly and with respect. Do not step on door sills or stand leaning on one leg. When sitting, do not sprawl or fidget. Greetings are important, and they have to be done properly. When greeting others of our own age, we should do so with mutual respect. When we're greeting someone who's older, like our aunts and uncles, or our parents, friends, or our teachers, we should do so courteously. We know that we feel badly if someone greets us in a way we do not like. Similarly, when walking, standing, or sitting, do so correctly. It is simply good manners. It also shows that our parents taught us well. The good habits we form when we're young will remain with us for the rest of our lives. Our friends may not care now if we sprawl all over the furniture or the floor, but as we grow older, these things will begin to matter to them. Also, fidgeting or sprawling can be a sign to others that we do not respect ourselves much. It says the same thing when we do not take care in how we behave and appear. Seeing this, others will not be inclined to treat us with respect either. In other words, when we walk, stand, or sit correctly, we are telling others that we value ourselves and are worthy of their respect. When entering a room, we should open the door carefully. When walking, we should be aware of our surroundings so as to not bump into anything. Hold empty containers just as carefully as if they were full. Enter empty rooms as if they were occupied. We don't want to disturb people when we walk into a room, so we should enter quietly. Depending on how busy they are, we can decide whether it is best to remain quiet or if we can go ahead and talk to them. If we just want to do something in the same room, we can politely nod or smile, acknowledging their presence. Then we can do what we came in for. If we know the room is empty, it is still good to enter as if someone is there. In other words, we shouldn't run into a room or make a lot of noise as we enter. Even if no one is in that room, there may be other people in the next room, so we need to consider them. And when moving around, we should always be aware of our surroundings. Not paying attention can result in our bumping into something and maybe even breaking it. By leaving enough room for ourselves, we won't hurt ourselves or embarrass ourselves in front of others. Also, whenever we carry something, it is always best to do so carefully with both hands. This includes not just full containers, but also empty ones, as they may break if we drop them. So holding things carefully is a good habit to develop. Avoid doing things in a hurry, since acting in haste will lead to many mistakes. Think this one is obvious? Unfortunately, it wasn't to Rufus and his 5 brothers. Haste makes waste, just ask Rufus. Rufus and his 5 brothers were very happy. They had always wanted to join the army so they could help defend their country. But the country had been at peace, so the king had little need for new soldiers. So why were they so happy? The king had just announced that he needed new soldiers because many had taken early retirement. The brothers were happy because now finally they would be able to do their part to help protect the country and its citizens. But without any helmets and weapons, nor a chariot or a horse to pull it, they were in a bind. So Rufus quickly called Acme Armor Supply. They were in luck. Acme had a special promotion and was giving away a free spear with every helmet and armor set. Now the only problem was transportation. This one had them stumped and gave Rufus a few sleepless nights while waiting for the delivery from Acme. Finally, Rufus had an idea. He may have been the youngest, but he had always been the one with the bright ideas. Rufus was out in the stable. Actually, it was a shed since they had no horses. Poking around and thinking when he noticed a big basket that they had all woven together when they were still in school. Rufus then spied the stone grinding wheel near it. He had it. Excitedly, he began rummaging around until he found an old axle and a spare plow handle. He got the brothers together and they began to work quickly under his direction. They soon had all the pieces together, and boy, was it a beauty. 3 of the brothers ran next door to ask if they could borrow their neighbor's horse. Being a good citizen and won over by the gleeful brothers, he agreed. The brothers brought the horse home and went to hitch it up. But there was a slight problem. In their haste, Rufus's brothers had hitched the handle and axle to the back of the basket area, their name for their new vehicle, instead of the front. Their brothers were all standing around, scratching their heads, and Rufus was looking particularly pained when the Acme van drove up. The driver gave them their packages, congratulated them on their patriotism, and drove off before they could try out the spears. The brothers were delighted because now they could join the army. Then they remembered that the horse couldn't be hitched to the basket area as usual. Rufus had the answer. He'd push. The brothers ran happily into the house, put on their armor, and quickly kissed their parents goodbye. They ran out and piled into the basket area while Rufus went behind to push. But there was a slight problem. They had forgotten their helmets. Muttering, Rufus ran into the house, grabbed the helmets, and finally they were off. But there was a slight problem. Rufus couldn't see where he was going, and all 5 of his brothers were excitedly yelling directions at the same time. Rufus stopped pushing, rolled his eyes, and through clenched teeth asked for a spear. He cut a hole in the basket and called it the navigator's window. Only the brother whose turn it was to sit at the window could give directions. Delighted with this arrangement, everyone resumed their position, and off they quickly went. But there was a slight problem. The brothers didn't know where they were supposed to go. They were making good time, but probably going the wrong way. Fuming under his breath, Rufus banged his head a few times on the basket handles. But he soon got himself under control and ran to get directions from a passerby. When he returned, he told the brothers exactly where the army post was and how to get there. He made them repeat the directions to be sure they all knew where they were going. They quickly started off again and soon came to where they were to cross a river. But there was a slight problem. The brothers were in the wrong spot. What can I say? They had gotten confused. It turned out that they should have crossed 2 miles back. Rufus, who was now gnashing his teeth and tugging at his hair, quickly turned the basket around. Back they went to where they had just come from. They turned where they should have in the first place and crossed the river. By this time, the brothers were all holding on for dear life because Rufus was running so fast the basket was almost airborne. The 5 brothers spotted the army post and cheered Rufus on to where the recruitment table was set up. But there was a slight problem. As Rufus dragged himself up to the table, the recruitment officer looked at the muttering, bedraggled, mud-splattered, and red-faced Rufus, and then turned to his 5 grinning brothers in the basket. The army officer, standing tall in his spiffy uniform, looked them over, slowly shook his head, and stamped "Rejected, no appeal" on their applications. Acting in haste usually ends in mistakes and disappointment. Do not be afraid of a task that is difficult or become careless when a job is easy. Sometimes we want to do something, but we're afraid to try because the job seems so hard. Other times, a task can seem so easy that we don't do it as carefully as we should. A heart as big as an elephant. Deep in the jungle lived 2 friends, a large elephant and a small bird no bigger than the tip of the elephant's trunk. You might think their friendship was unusual, but in the past, such things were quite common. Animals and birds could talk to one another, and they all got along happily together. One day, while bird and elephant were enjoying a drink of water at their favorite stream, they heard distant calls of distress. Elephant asked Bird to please fly up high to see what was happening. Bird flew above the trees and saw the reason for the alarm. There was a fire on a distant ridge. Bird quickly flew down to Elephant and reported what he had seen. Elephant knelt down, put her ear to the ground, and said, yes, she could hear the sounds of many animals running. Bird said excitedly, we have to help our friends. Not all the birds can fly high and long enough to escape the fire. Elephant agreed. And not all the animals are fast enough to outrun the flames. But what can we do? I can carry water on my wings, and you can carry it in your trunk. And with that, Bird dove under the water and then soared up into the air. He flew to the fire and sprinkled the few drops of water he had onto the flames. He then flew back to where Elephant was filling her trunk. Hurry, cried Bird. But Elephant reassured her friend. Don't worry, you cannot carry much water, but my trunk holds a lot. Bird dove into the water again and flew off to the fire. After Elephant filled her trunk and went a few steps, she carelessly tripped and spilled some water. Back to the stream she went to refill her trunk. In the meantime, Bird was flying back and forth as fast as he could. The fleeing animals cried out, save yourself, it's hopeless, you can't carry enough water. Bird replied he had to try, and that Elephant was bringing water in her trunk. The animals knew that Bird was very persistent, but they also knew that as good-hearted as Elephant was, she was careless, so they weren't sure how helpful she would be. Inspired by Bird and Elephant, the other birds and animals pitched in to help. Soon they were all working together to put out the fire. All the noise woke the forest god. He saw Bird fearlessly flying back and forth, leading the others in trying to put out the fire. He also saw Elephant and the other animals helping. Touched by their courage, the forest god threw his staff high into the air to pierce a cloud. Rain began to fall, and soon the fire was out. With everyone safe, Bird flew back to Elephant. Always honest, Elephant confessed she hadn't paid enough attention to what she was doing. She put her trunk on the ground to cradle her exhausted friend and promised that in the future she would be more careful. To carry out tasks, we need to be not only courageous, but careful as well. Keep away from rowdy places. Do not be curious about things that are bad or unusual. When we are about to enter a house, we should ask if anyone is inside. As we enter, we should make ourselves heard. If someone asks who it is, we should say our name, not me, because such a reply is not clear. It can seem exciting to go to the kinds of places that our parents or older siblings tell us that we are too young for. And it is especially tempting when other kids say they're going and want us to go along with them. But until we grow up, it is best not to consider going to such places. We should also avoid things we know to be bad. Curiosity can cause a lot of problems. So when we're young, it is best to check out new things with parents or others who are knowledgeable. By avoiding rowdy places and bad things, we are in fact respecting what our parents have told us. Before we visit someone, we should first check to see if we can come by at a certain time. When we reach our destination, we need to see if anyone is there, calling out, "Is anyone home?" or knocking on the door will let them know that we are there. We should also identify ourselves instead of assuming that they will recognize our voice. So after calling out their name, we should give our own. With that done, it is polite to wait until invited in. It is also considerate to ask if we are interrupting them. Politeness will ensure that we are always welcome. Before using something that belongs to another, we should ask for permission. If we do not ask, it is stealing. After we borrow from others, we should return the items on time. Later, if we have an urgent need, we will be able to easily borrow from them again. When we see an object just lying around, we shouldn't take it, nor should we assume that it doesn't belong to anyone. Elmer learned about this the hard way and found piece of cheese, owner unclear. Excuse me, sir. I don't mean to be rude, and I certainly don't wish to bother you, but may I please ask what you're doing with that cheese? It was a reasonable question, and very politely asked. But then Cameo was a very polite cat. When her mother was pregnant, the doctor told her she needed to get plenty of rest if she wanted to have healthy kittens. Putting her kitten's needs first, Cameo's mother did exactly as she was told. Since she lived in a bookstore, she decided the logical thing to do would be to spend her time reading, and so she read many books. One of her favorites was on etiquette. She felt that since her kittens would be living with humans, it would be helpful for them to know what humans considered as good behavior. So she diligently studied the book and taught her kittens all about human etiquette. By listening attentively to her mother, Cameo grew up to be a very polite cat. She would run to greet people as they came into the bookstore, making eye contact as she welcomed them. If they didn't answer her, she didn't mind. After all, their thoughts could be elsewhere. When invited, she would jump up onto the customer's lap when they sat in the chairs scattered around the shop. She would listen attentively as the customer spoke to her and meow back her carefully considered responses. When they left, she would slowly walk them to the door to let them know she was sad to see them go. So it was only logical that when Cameo spoke to the mouse, she did so respectfully. Excuse me, sir. I don't mean to be rude, and I certainly don't wish to bother you. But may I please ask what you're doing with that cheese? She questioned. The mouse, who was called Elmer, was so shocked that he dropped the big chunk of cheese and just stared at her. Never had he met a polite cat, or one that talked for that matter. He finally blurted out, "Huh?" Unlike Cameo, Elmer did not have the benefit of a good education. Cameo calmly repeated her question and tried to make eye contact, but now Elmer wouldn't look directly at her. I found it," he muttered. Cameo sat down and studied Elmer. "May I ask where you found it?" This was more than Elmer had bargained for, and he was getting rather worried. His mother just told him to go get the cheese. She hadn't said anything about the bookshop cat who thought she was a lawyer. On Mr. Rasmussen's desk, he stammered. Cameo said, "Then the cheese must belong to Mr. Rasmussen. Excuse me for asking, but did he say you could have it?" "No," Elmer nervously admitted. "Oh dear, then you're stealing it," concluded Cameo. Indignantly, Elmer declared, "I'm not a thief. I found it lying on the table. No one was eating it. No one was even around. But if the owner of the cheese did not give it to you, then you took it without permission. And I'm very sorry, but that's stealing," Cameo explained. Elmer's eyes got bigger as he asked, "Are you sure? I thought if I found something just lying around, then it didn't belong to anyone. Finders keepers. So I took it." "No, almost everything belongs to someone, like that cheese. Before we take something, we need to find and ask the owner first." Cameo was trying to be kind because clearly Elmer didn't know that he was doing anything wrong. "I didn't think of that. You're right." And with that, Elmer began to wail, "Oh no, I'm a thief." "No, no, not if you put it back and never take anything again," Cameo assured him. "Don't worry, we'll figure out a way to get the cheese back on the table." And that is just what they did. Cameo then promised Elmer that she would never tell anyone what had happened, and Elmer never again took anything without first asking the owner. Regrettably, dear reader, as much as I would like to tell you how they put the cheese back, I cannot. When Elmer told me about this, he made me promise not to tell anyone because that might get a certain bird in trouble.